Good morning, everyone. Good to have you here. Good to see familiar faces and some new people as well. Wonderful to have you here and wonderful to be with you once again. I'm recovering from a long cold and my voice has been sort of strained. I did make it through the chanting, but I planned a somewhat shorter Dharma talk just to make sure that I actually make it through to the end. I hope you'll find it adequate. Of course, some people may be very pleased to have a shorter Dharma talk, and we'll hope that I have a cold every month from now on. So we'll just see how it all goes. So I'm going to base my Dharma talk on something that happened in the spring, actually. I participated in the campus cleanup day for Earth Day. This is back in April. And so for 2 hours, I wandered along the light rail tracks that we have on campus at the University of Waterloo, where I teach. Wandered along picking up garbage. That was my task there. There were other people who were also working nearby doing this sort of thing. I had a kind of a gripper thing, so I didn't have to bend over too much. But still, that evening, my shoulder was kind of tired from doing something that I don't usually do for a long period of time there. So honestly, maybe if I helped out more, it wouldn't have hurt so much. So that's probably on me. And this process, though, it was kind of meditative. It was interesting because I just walked very slowly, scanning the ground and picking up trash, put it in my bag as I found it. So I was just very dialed in on the process. I wasn't worried about my kids or about work or about all the other things that give me stress in my life, right? So it was just very kind of meditative, very calm. I felt kind of grateful to this trash for being there because it gave me the opportunity to go out and just do this thing that kind of cleared my mind. And I saw the first two butterflies of the year there, in the springtime that I hadn't seen any before that. So, there's probably a lesson in all of this. Get outside and help the earth, and it'll help you as well, right? Um, at one point, there were some other volunteers who also came through my area. Like I got started right away, and I went through, and then some other people who had started a little later, they also came up behind me, going through the same area. And these were students at the university, and they moved fast. So, while I was walking along very slowly, they were coming through fast. They were talking to each other the whole time, and soon they were way further along than me. They'd made way more seeming progress than I had. Yet, as I continued through the same area that now they had passed me and they'd gone ahead, and I was coming behind them in the same place and everything. So I was going through the area they had gone through. As I came along after them, I found a lot of additional trash that they hadn't noticed, right? So, they came through and they got the large, sort of, shiny, brightly colored trash. They got all that, all the interesting trash they got, right? But they missed large amounts of smaller, kind of duller trash that was there, especially cigarette butts. Like I just basically spent, a couple hours picking up cigarette butts. It seemed like there was just so much of this trash that if you really looked, you'd find it. And this was kind of a surprising discovery for me, actually. Than I thought there was going to be, right? When I got to my area, there along the tracks, actually, it's mostly green grass alongside an asphalt path there. And there's some trees and everything. So, as I'm walking up to it, it looked fairly green, fairly good. I could see a few brightly pieces of the trash, but students went and got those before I got to them, this sort of thing. So it looked fairly clean, right? Unlike some places on campus where there's just actually a lot of obvious trash and you really see it, around and everything. This looked fairly good, fairly natural. And I was like, oh, this is going to be an easy job. Okay, all right. I'll do this quickly and then I'll, get my Earth Day moment and then I'll go home, no big deal. I continually found these small pieces of trash everywhere I looked, including where the students had been and in places where they hadn't been. And so, really looking closely actually at this seemingly green area, it turned out that partially hidden there in the grass, there were innumerable cigarette butts, there were small pieces of plastic all over, and there were lots and lots of fragments of roofing materials. So once I noticed this, and I kind of determined, kind of vowed to myself, I was going to really pick up everything. I wasn't going to, shirk and, go past anything or leave anything or be like, it's a whatever, I was actually going to pick up all the human generated trash that there was. So then it ended up taking me over 2 hours just to cover a couple hundred meters. So, I did it really thoroughly, but I took a long time to go a fairly short distance. Meanwhile, I basically probably got lapped by the students who were there, right? So this is really surprising to me, just how much human generated waste there really was when you really looked really closely and paid attention. So naturally, since I'm a Buddhist studies professor and a Buddhist minister, I couldn't help thinking about how this relates to Buddhism, right? It's Earth Day, I'm out there picking up trash, but my brain is doing Buddhism the whole time because that's just how I'm built at this point. So as we know, Buddhism, among other things, this is a process for developing wisdom and compassion by learning about our mental defilements, right? By becoming aware of how our mind works and then working with the mind. This is part of the essential Buddhist practice, right? The Buddhist process. So when we first look inside our minds, we're often surprised by just how cluttered they are with all kinds of thoughts. The amount of sort of, if we want to call it this kind of like mental trash that's stuffed into every corner of our minds or continually popping up to distract us or to flatter our egos or make us mad, it's really actually just kind of enormous when we start paying attention to it. I remember how shocked I was as a new Buddhist, mostly doing Zen back in the 1990s. I'd always thought of myself as a fairly nice guy, and since I'm basically the opposite of a jock, I know that's surprising to you looking at me, my towering height and muscular physique and everything. Nonetheless, I was kind of the opposite of a jock, so I always relied on my mind as my primary asset. So I thought it was pretty good. I was doing pretty good with that and everything. And I tried to be a nice guy and everything. I couldn't get by on a look, so I had to be nice. So I thought, my mind can't be that bad, right? But once I started really systematically examining it through meditation and other sort of practices, it was kind of depressing to look inside and discover just how much greed and anger and honestly just kind of stupid thoughts were always flitting through my mind. If you do long periods of silent meditation, you get a real chance to like really be confronted with just how much there is in there. I would just sit there in the Zen meditation hall and stare at the wall as we're supposed to do, and examine my mind or let things go through my mind. And the process is anything, but really I just spent hour after hour, all this static going on in my mind the whole time. It was kind of surprising and depressing. And I kind of thought that with dedicated practice over time, I would get better, and maybe these, mental trash, so to speak, would kind of go away. My mind would become clearer and purer, and I wouldn't have any more of these mental poisons and this sort of thing. But didn't really go like that. I have to admit, every time that I thought I had made some progress with my mind, something would happen to show me that actually there were always deeper layers of kind of like wrong thoughts or bad thoughts in there. There's always more trash going on up here, so to speak, that I only noticed when I slowed down and I really looked. And this happened so often that I came to basically mistrust my ability to find it all. No matter how long I spent with that mental gripper going through the terrain of my mind, there's just always going to be more to find in there. So how was I going to actually accomplish this? Especially under my own efforts, it seemed unlikely. And as a matter of fact, Shinran Shonin, the founder of this tradition of Buddhism, he discovered the same basic truth about himself. This is why he left the mountaintop monastery and journeyed in search of a Dharma path that could liberate even such a foolish person as himself, or indeed like myself, right? Shinran talked about this in his Wasan, the hymns, the songs that he wrote. These are his words, quote, I'm not going to sing them. Don't worry. I'll just recite them. Although I take refuge in the true Pure Land way, it is hard to have a true and sincere mind. This self is false and insecure. I completely lack a pure mind. Each of us, in outward bearing, makes a show of being wise, good, and dedicated. But so great are our greed, anger, perversity, and deceit that we're filled with all forms of malice and cunning. Extremely difficult is it to put an end to our evil nature. The mind is like a venomous snake or scorpion. Our performance of good acts is also poisoned. Hence it's called false and empty. Shinran discovered when he looked inside himself. Although outwardly he wore the robes of a monk and he performed the practices of an elite Buddhist master, inwardly his mind was still full of junk. And he was a very sort of almost brutally self-honest person. When he found that after decades of intense Buddhist practice, that his mind was still not pure, that it was still not clear, he admitted this. He still had lots of desire. He had lots of anger. He had lots of ignorance in these ways. In fact, the more he looked, the more he found. Meanwhile, many of the other monks around him in the monastery, they carried on as if their minds and the hearts were kind of trash-free, so to speak. They just got rid of some of the kind of surface level basic mental poisons, and then they acted and thought as if they were already Buddhas, and they kind of paraded around and acted as if they were higher than other people, especially lay people, normal people in this way. But Shinran looked closer and closer at himself, and he kept finding that there were all sorts of mental junk still remaining. However, this isn't the end of the story. Shinran realized that he was only able to see ever deeper into his mental darkness because the light of the Buddha was shining on him so brightly, illuminating his deficiencies. So he also wrote Wasans of joy at his condition. He wasn't just stuck with his mental poisons, but realized that with the assistance of the Buddha, that there was, however, a liberation that would come from this situation. So here's what he sang. I won't sing it though. But even when the sun, moon, and stars and their constellations are veiled by smoke, mist, clouds, or fog, beneath mist and cloud there's brightness, not dark. I realize now that Amida Buddha's beneficent light surpasses even sun and moon. Necessarily, then, we will reach the dawn of supreme, pure Shinjin. Shinjin is the awakening of the trusting heart that we seek in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. So we will reach the dawn of supreme, pure Shinjin, whereupon the clouds of birth and death will clear. Then the pure, unhindered radiance will be luminous, and the true Dharma realm of oneness will become manifest. When persons awaken Shinjin and say, Namo Amida Butsu, Amida Buddha's light embraces and protects them. And in this light, boundless and inconceivable, never ceases a moment, nor does it differentiate by time or place or any circumstance. This is what Shinran realized through this sort of process. So thus, when we examine ourselves, we find that we're full of attachments, but nonetheless, let's not despair. The light of wisdom that allows us to see our shortcomings is the same light of compassion that ultimately liberates us from them. As we steep ourselves ever deeper in the Dharma, we become more aware of ever smaller and more hidden dark aspects of our minds. But that means that the process is working as the Buddha's light reveals ourselves to ourselves. Yeah, we can be grateful that and that no matter how much mental rubbish we discover, we're always embraced and affirmed. I'm that Dr. Taitetsu Uno talked about back around this same time period. I heard this from him at the New York Buddhist Church. Talked about how, at first our minds are dark, and it's like walking around in your house with the lights off, and you keep bumping into furniture and everything. Then when you encounter the Dharma, begin to examine yourself, and you allow the Buddha's light to shine into your mind, you begin examining, then it's like turning the lights on. Now you see all the obstacles that were there, the greed, the attachment, the problems, the ignorance and everything. It's like seeing the furniture. Oh, there's the sofa, there's the easy chair, there's the TV stand, these sort of things, right? They don't go away. But because the light is shining, first of all, you see them, whereas before you didn't see them. So you're like, oh no, look at all this stuff. But also now that you see them, you're better able to navigate through them. You're better able to avoid them. It doesn't mean that our lives, that our minds can become fully clear, fully pure during this lifetime. It's not terribly likely, but able to see those problems that we have in our minds, it becomes much easier to steer away from them, to navigate around them, to accept that they're there, and I don't know, maybe flop on the couch sometimes. Sometimes you just are going to be angry, or you're going to be hungry, or whatever it is, and you just, let that attachment be. It's part of life. But you're not walking around in the dark banging your shins against these things anymore, because the light of the Buddha is showing you what your mind is like, and therefore you're able to operate in a more healthy, safer, better sort of way. So this was sort of an analogy that I used for this sort of situation. So now I have to say that when I walk outside on campus or elsewhere and I see some trash on the ground, I often say to myself, Namo Amida Butsu. That's because seeing that trash reminds me of my foolishness now that I've come to associate mental poisons and so on. So it reminds me of how my mind is, as shown to me by the Buddha. So, of course, I try to remind myself to pick up the trash too. It's not just about analogies and this sort of thing, but actually picking up the trash is a good thing. After all, the earth is another bodhisattva that helps me to live and helps me to awaken, and I should take care of her, right? So these were my thoughts about how going along and picking up the trash reminded me of what my mind was like. And also remembering what my mind is like helps me to try to remember to pick up the darn trash too. That's important. Anyways, this is my short-ish Dharma talk for October. Thank you for your patience of listening to my reflection. And that will be the end of this for today. If we put our hands together and Gasho and say the Nibutsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda. 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 Thank you very much, everyone.